Hello and welcome to Center Ice Cardcast, your one-stop podcast shop for all things hockey cards. My name is Eric Andrews, also known in the hobby as Hammerhawks, and I'm joined by my co-host and fellow hobbyist Aaron Goldstein, better known throughout the hobby as Crease Collector. So before we get into the main topic for the episode, which will definitely take up the majority of the episode, Aaron, I know that you recently started a pretty unique little side project for your collection, and I know you don't want to give away too much of it, but do you want to just give a little sneak preview of what that project is?
Sure, no problem. So we were just talking about it like right before we jumped on, but I explained a little bit about it on an Instagram post in my profile. So if you want to go there, check it out at Crease Collector to get a little bit more information. But pretty much what it is this autograph project that I'm going to title the Builders category. And now, for those who are wondering, yes, it does have not a Hall of Fame element, but it is kind of based off, the Hall of Fame builders category, where they might not have played, but they have a certain, effect on the game in a certain way. They may have been owners or general managers or even commentators. They affected the game in a certain way, and they kind of left their mark on the NHL. And so for my collection, I kind of wanted to create a builders category of its own. And so I decided, because I'm a majority a player collector in the hobby, and for those who know me well, know that I collect US Enroth cards. And so I decided, why not try and get autographs of people who kind of made these cards possible? So I decided to get a few people that I originally thought of to sign some Enroth cards from my collection that they helped sort of create. So again, I'm not going to give away too much, and you'll kind of see how this project evolves. But it's really cool to get a bunch of creative people that kind of left their mark from a hobby perspective, and some of them are pretty well known to kind of leave their mark on this little autograph collection. So I don't want to give too much away, but it's a really cool project, and I hope that it kind of inspires you a little bit, especially for those autograph collectors out there. I know it's a little bit of a different take than what people usually do with in person or TTM through the mail autographs, but it's a little fun little project, and I hope you guys really enjoy. Like, I know I'm really excited about it. So just want to touch on that a little bit now. And now we're going to get into the main topic of this episode. I thought it was a really good episode topic when Eric brought it up, but we're going to start with pretty much the focus on the episode today is just the outlook and kind of mentality towards the hobby. We kind of prime this a little bit through social media, but it's a really hard thing to get into words. And so we're going to kind of tackle it a little bit here of kind of like a state of the hobby episode and our thoughts on that. So our first question, it's kind of a good one. I don't want to say controversial, but definitely a good one. But what is the quote unquote right mentality to have about the hobby? The right mentality to have? That's a really interesting question. So I think, especially now, the water has been, I guess, muddied a little bit, with the presence of new, I guess, investors in the hobby, but also like new collectors, brand new collectors, or new collectors that, have rejoined the hobby from years of absence. And of course, the people in the hobby who are already there. So the right mentality to have, I guess in my opinion, it seems kind of corny, but the right mentality is just to approach it like any other hobby and just really have fun. I mean, I'm not sure if maybe card collecting is your only hobby, but if it is, that's totally cool. If not, hopefully you can look back on either previous hobbies you've had or current hobbies you also enjoy and just try to think about, what, like, how do I approach basket weaving if you basket weave? Do I stress out about it? Not really. I mean, it's kind of fun. It's kind of cool. I don't basket weave, but I'm sure it would be kind of cool. And how do I approach that hobby? Like what's the right way or wrong way? Chances are you probably don't think about it too much to begin with. You're just too busy having fun and just doing your own thing, and that's kind of it. And that's kind of the right way for me, at least, the right mentality to kind of have about the hobby. Just have fun and do whatever is fun for you, and kind of drown out all the rest of the noise going on in it. So it might be kind of hard, especially with, social media nowadays. Every hobby has kind of a community around it. And, that can also play a part in muddying new waters or bringing up unnecessary drama, I guess you'd say, within a certain hobby, depending on where you're connected. But for me, the big word is fun and just something that makes sense. I'm not going to collect something that I feel other people should want me to collect, if that makes sense, because that just won't make sense. It's like basket weaving and making certain baskets that you would really don't need. It just doesn't make sense, right? So make the baskets that you want to make, collect the cards that you want to make. Just have fun and collect the cards that you actually want. And that's kind of the main thing you'll probably hear me out. Like, I don't want to sound like too much of a broken record. This is a great question. But yeah, just have fun. And that for me is the mentality around that. It has to be fun in order for me to pursue it, whether it's a certain cool card that I want, or whether it's a new autograph project or something like that. Just that's the mentality for me. The big word is fun.
Yeah, for sure. I think we both have a pretty similar view on that topic and this question that we're answering. So I won't ramble too much, just repeating everything you just said. I guess one thing that I'm curious, it certainly appears as though you are interested in basket weaving based on how passionate you seem to be about
I
it.
mean, it's the first thing that came to mind, and I don't basket weave, but after me repeating it a couple times, basket weaving, I probably shouldn't I? I probably owe it to myself to at least investigate that a little bit to see if it's something I would enjoy. I mean, you never know. Next week I'll be weaving a basket to keep my cards in instead of a binder. I think that'll be the next level for me. For those who've been sticking around the podcast for a little bit, my thing is binders. So maybe next week it's keep my cards in baskets.
I'm
I'm
not
sure that'll keep them
sure.
in pristine condition.
I'm not sure if it's an upgrade, but I'm not sure it's necessarily a downgrade either.
It's just sort of just keeping it level. That's pretty much what
Yeah,
it is.
it's
So
just
we'll see next week. We'll see.
shifting from one mediocre method to another.
I mean, I wouldn't call basket weave mediocre, but sure. All right, let's go with that.
Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I think obviously if you're not having fun with your collection, I don't know how much of a point there is to even be collecting in the first place. Yeah, obviously nowadays there is a much more, apparent focus on the monetary and financial component of the hobby, but at the end of the day it is in fact a hobby, and just the nature of a hobby is that it's something that you are doing for enjoyment and satisfaction. So if you're not having fun and not enjoying what you're doing, I don't think there's a whole lot of reason to be doing it. So yeah, everything you said is pretty much how I feel about that question too. Just focusing on what you enjoy, and you will hear this said throughout the episode quite a few times. So that's kind of the overarching theme that will be brought up quite a few times with various topics and questions that we will talk about later. Shifting to the second question topic that we have, this one is definitely one that's been brought up quite a few times, on social media. I feel like I see this happen, see this mentioned or asked a few times, like pretty regularly. It seems like, especially on Twitter. I don't know why that is, but I feel like I see it more on Twitter than anywhere else. But that question being, how do I find a balance between collecting and selling or flipping cards? And to me, obviously, yes, I sell cards, and yes, sometimes I buy things knowing, hey, I'm buying this because it's a decent price and I can probably sell it for a little bit more. Or, I think this is a good buy at this price right now, and maybe in a year or two it will go up in value and I can sell it then. The thing about doing that is that needs to be like a secondary component of your collecting. So, for me, like I said, I do that. I actually recently did that. I bought a Mark Stone Upper Deck Ice Premier's rookie, graded 9.5. It's actually a True Gem high grade. I don't even think I've told you about this card, Aaron.
Nice card. I think so. I wasn't sure if it was graded though, but that's a really nice card actually.
Yeah, it's a really nice card. It has, obviously it's BGS 9.5, and it has 210 subgrades on it. So it's 0.5 away from being a pristine 10 actually. But obviously I don't collect Mark Stone, but I saw it and thought it was really reasonably priced. So I just picked it up saying, hey, I'm going to buy it, hang on to it. Hopefully if Vegas ever goes on a deep playoff run or wins the cup, that card will be worth a lot more. So that's just an example of one that I did very recently. I think that was just a few weeks ago. But the point of that is, when I do things like that, it's so that I am making money to then put back into my personal collection. So that's how I fund a lot of my personal collection. I'm not just spending tons of money out of pocket. It's more, taking cards that I might already have that I'm not glued to, selling those so that I can buy something I do really want, or in the case of like the stone, seeing something that I know is a good price, buying it, selling it either right away or down the road for, some level of profit that again goes back into my collection. So, I think that's kind of the important thing, is that yes, I do that, but that's not the focus of my collecting. The focus of my collecting is still getting cards that I enjoy for myself, that I plan to keep, as long as I'm collecting. So to me, that's kind of where the balance is. It's not even, I would say it's not even like I go out of my way to look for it. It's kind of more just like if I happen upon something like that Mark Stone, I was just on Twitter one night and saw it and was like, yeah, I'm going to grab that. That's a good price. Why not? I'm not scouring social media all day long looking for great deals and things like that. It's more just, hey, if I can find a cool card and then down the road find it a better home and, make a little bit that I can put back into my personal collection, great. So if you have that mentality and outlook on kind of like the selling, flipping topic, I think that's a very, very healthy way to look at it. And I think that's honestly what a lot of collectors do. I mean, obviously you can't just endlessly spend out of pocket for cards. So, finding ways to kind of generate that financing for your personal collection is certainly good and, a healthy thing to do for sure. But yeah, obviously there are people that all they do is just buy resale lots and just are constantly focused on the making money aspect of it. And maybe, yeah, they do collect certain things and stuff, but they're just doing that endlessly just to be making money and not with the focus of putting that back into their actual personal collection. So that's kind of how I view it and how I find that balance. And again, through all of that, keeping in mind that at the end of the day, that's still all part of the hobby for me. It's not, I never view that as like a business type of thing or anything like that. It's still completely, the hobby mentality that I have when I'm doing that.
That's awesome and well said too. It's really hard when talking about, buying and selling or collecting, like what part of my collection should be, collecting and adding to that and buying or selling other stuff. And it's hard to really quantify or really put into words like, oh, you should be selling or buying or selling like 50% of the time and then adding to your collection maybe another 50% of the time, or trying to have that balance. Like if you want to have that balance in terms of a budget, I think that's fine. Like allocating, a certain percent of your budget here or here, I think that's fine. But I think the main thing, at least for me, when looking at the buying and selling aspect of the hobby, I mean, all cards have like monetary value, like whether it's low or high. And we've all, traded away stuff, bought stuff, sold stuff. That's a part of any hobby, I would think, especially now with cards. It's kind of always been that way. But the main thing for me is like, as long as someone is getting into the hobby, I think for the right reasons, I think that's really key to having like that longevity. If someone gets into the hobby and just sees kind of dollar signs like right away, I don't think that balance is going to be quite healthy. And I think it might really kind of disappoint them because, it goes a lot of work like profiting off cards. It's very, like it'll probably turn this hobby into like not a hobby, like very quickly for you. Like it can be very stressful. But I think if you go into the hobby, like maybe when you were a kid and you collected just genuinely, like just for the love of it. And then when you were older, obviously you got a more understanding about how the card market works. And then you wanted to pick up stuff from there, I think that's fine. But I think if your first introduction into the hobby is just about money, I mean, that's fine. Like you can do what you're going to do. But I think, if you say that you genuinely like the hobby, I think it's going to be a little bit of a crash and burn a little bit. And you've seen that happen before too. People come in like just for the money and it doesn't work out too well. So I think if you're kind of on the fence or have just introduced yourself to this awesome hobby, I would say, collect for a bit when you can, get a lay of the land figured out, have a cool, awesome collection. And then from there, if you want to branch out buying and selling, I think that's fine, but definitely get, a good look at the market and how this hobby works a little bit before you start going into that stuff. And for those power sellers out there, I mean, I'm sure they all, and a lot of them have, to their credit, do have a personal and just natural integration into the hobby, probably from when they were younger. And so there's that, nostalgic and fun part of the hobby that they'll always go back to, or they'll have a handful of cards that kind of brings that out to them. And then, if they do more buying and selling these days than they did when they're, were younger, that's fair. It's just it's an evolution of sorts, for some people. Whereas some people will go like for myself, I used to buy and sell a little bit more and trade away a lot. Now I kind of regress that a little bit. And now for the last who knows how many years, it's been just personally just picking up cards for the collection. And if I sell the card here or there, that's fine. But for me, it was more regressing it back towards, the roots of my collection. Whereas for some people, they're evolving a little bit forward into that market. And that's fair. But I think as long as, like I said, your introduction into the hobby is good, I think that's a really good mix. I think you'll find that mix for yourself just naturally.
And I think one thing too, I mean, this is fairly obvious, but just to state it, just so you guys aren't confused, like obviously if you're a hobby shop owner or something, then yeah, obviously
you got to make money.
Your focus needs to be on making money.
Yeah,
if that's your career,
that's a little different.
That's your job, that's completely different. We're just talking in terms of if you're just purely a collector, you're doing this for enjoyment, it's not, your livelihood. Obviously that's a completely different conversation. And yes, you should be focusing on making money so that you can make a living. But
of course,
yeah, just to clarify that.
No, that's a fair point. That's very, very true. Like we've talked to a few, shop owners over the years. And yeah, I mean, obviously their hobby outlook is going to be a little bit different. And of course, their day-to-day is going to look a lot different too. Our next question is a really interesting one too. And it's one we've both received, both, I guess, personally and both through the podcast as well, like through our social feeds. But it's a simple question. What is the best thing to be collecting? I think there could be quotation marks around best, because that would kind of fall under like our first question a little bit. But what is the best thing to be collecting? And for me, like that's a tough one. Again, like we get this question so much. Like we'll get a private message or something like, oh, I have this card, should I keep collecting this player or should I sell and start collecting a new player? Who should I collect? Like who is the most upside? Or, should I go after McDavid or, like maybe a vintage player or something like that? Those are great questions, and one that we've all faced, or at least viewed in the hobby. Like what's the best thing to collect 5 years ago? Like what's the best thing to collect now in terms of a, investment type thing? It's a cool conversation, and it's one that you definitely look to see the trends, like I guess you could say the player trends. But it's similar to the first one. I mean, I can't really tell you that. It seems like I'm like a broken record, but I can't really tell you what the best thing is to collect, because it's such a big question. If this was a investment type episode, I'm sure we could make an argument for a couple players. But the best thing to collect, I think, is just what you like. It's if you want to, or if you've been collecting a while and say you want to go the investment avenue, that's fair. But your answers are going to be completely different from someone who just joined the hobby yesterday and says, hey, like, what's the best thing to collect? My answer would probably be a little bit different. I would say, well, do you have a favorite player? Do you have a favorite team? Was there a time in the hobby, if someone's, say, returning and they're kind of a new collector again, well, do you have a certain time in the hobby that you liked? Or like maybe a friend like had some cool cards you like? Well, maybe you have a set that they like to collect and you want to follow in their footsteps a little bit, or a certain year or era or something like that. There's so many ways to go about it, but like I think the best thing to collect, it's going to vary, and it's going to vary to who we talk to. If one of our hobby friends who we know have been collecting for a long time, and they say, hey, like we have those, I guess, investor type conversations, we're going to have an honest discussion about that and really think, okay, like what's the value of this card? What's the, I guess, investing potential, stuff like that. And that's a fair conversation. But again, the best thing to collect, and for me personally, like I want to focus on a little bit, the newer collector, it's just going to be about the things that you enjoy. And it's one of those questions where if someone else has to give you the answer, then you're not really on the right track. I think that kind of thing has to be said. So I think the best thing to collect is just something that you kind of really don't need to think about too much. It's going to be something that maybe a certain player sticks out to you and you're like, oh, like they're my favorite player. Maybe they do or they don't play on my favorite team. Cool. Like maybe you should think about collecting their cards and maybe get a little bit of an understanding of, the different types of products out there and stuff like that. And then go from there, and then these are the kind of cards you should start with, like stuff like that. So, the answer definitely varies, but for me, the best thing to collect is something you don't have to think about too much and then go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you summarized my thoughts exactly extremely well. Just to kind of repeat a few of those things and highlight some of these thoughts, the context of, who the collector is largely going to determine that. Their outlook on the hobby is going to determine that. Like you said, if it's a new collector, that's also going to factor into it. Like for me, when I first started collecting back in 2003, obviously literally any Chicago Blackhawks card was very interesting to me and I wanted it. It didn't matter if it was a base card, an autograph, a memorabilia card, parallel insert, like it did not matter. If it had a Blackhawks player on it, I wanted it and I thought it was cool. Now, another thing to keep in mind with this too is that as you go along in your collecting career, the answer to that question is probably going to change over time. So, for me, do I still go crazy trying to get every single Blackhawks card? Absolutely not. Do I want every single Blackhawks card? Absolutely not. Like there are a number of Blackhawks players in recent years that I intentionally avoid their cards because I didn't like them for whatever. Like, so I just have zero interest in those cards. Whereas, my whatever 7-year-old self or whatever would have been like, oh my gosh, it's a card of a Blackhawk. That's amazing. So, the answer will change over time, and that's okay. That I would say that's very normal. I know even for you, Aaron, obviously that kind of rings true for you too. You started out kind of trying to get a bunch of base cards and inserts and stuff of your favorite goalies. And while that's still something you value, that's maybe not something you actively focus on anymore.
Right. No, I
So,
think that's fair.
yeah, so I think the answer is certainly going to change as you progress throughout your collecting career, as you go along, as the years pass by. And that's also just going to come with the more experience that you have, you're going to get a better idea of the things that you like, the things that you value, the things that you think are cool, whatever it might be. So, I think that's really important to keep in mind is that the answer will change over the years and that's perfectly fine. But like you said, at the end of the day, it's ultimately what you enjoy collecting. Are there people out there that thoroughly enjoy collecting Connor McDavid cards? Absolutely. Wayne Gretzky cards? Absolutely. Is there anything wrong with having cards of those players? No, of course not. But if you're just picking up cards of those guys saying, oh, I know if I post this on social media, people will think it's cool, but like it's a cool card, but like I don't know, like I don't have that much, attachment to it. Well, then you're probably not really collecting the right thing. So, I think like what Aaron said, if I have to tell you, you're not going down the right track. I think that's very true. And obviously there's so many different things that you can collect, whether that be a player, a set, a year, whatever it could be. I mean, there's so many different ways that you could go with your collection that there really isn't a wrong answer. It truly is what you enjoy. And that's really all that matters. Because again, going back to that first question, if you're not having fun, if you're not enjoying it, what's the point? So yeah, I think that pretty thoroughly answers that question. And again, like I said, the context, obviously, if you're talking about investment and stuff like that, that's going to be a different answer. But, that's not something that we focus on too much as we're, definitely collectors at heart. So we're just answering all of these purely from a collector, outlook on the hobby. So shifting to the next question, should I be worried about what other people are collecting? This is something, again, that, I think has been fairly prominent over the last couple of years as we've seen a big influx of people into the hobby, whether that be new collectors or old collectors that are quote unquote kind of becoming new collectors again after an extended break from the hobby. Should I take the lead that other people are putting out there with what they're collecting, and should I, try to kind of mimic what they're doing? I think the answer to that is largely tied to that last question. Maybe that answer is yes, maybe it's no. It's going to come down to, what do you enjoy collecting? If you see someone post something on social media and you say, wow, I really like the look of that card, I'm going to try to collect the set because I really enjoy how that card looks. That's perfectly fine. Like, I think that's great to get inspiration from what other people are doing. But if you're just basing your collection based on what other people are doing, then again, it kind of goes back to that idea of you're not really collecting for yourself at that point. So you're probably not getting as much enjoyment and satisfaction out of it as you could be. So, again, there is kind of a little bit of a balance there, but still at the end of the day, it does go back to, you have to collect what you enjoy or you're going to get burnt out fairly quickly.
That's a great way to put it. No, for sure. I think for me, it's a little bit of both. Or I think if you're like new to the hobby and really want our opinions on it, like, should you care about what other people are collecting? Ultimately, no, of course, and just kind of focus on your own thing. But there is a little bit of, you know, being open to, not open to change per se, but, like having, insight on what other people collect might maybe inspires you in a certain way. And so I think, not that you should be like worried like what other people collect, or like not really in that sense like worried, but
You
just
can
more
learn
like
from it.
just, yeah, just learn from it, like be aware and know that, oh, like, like maybe this person was in my shoes a year ago and look what they've done with their collection. Like maybe this is an avenue I could take as well, like kind of like a roadmap in a sense. So that's fair, but not really worried. I mean, even if it's someone who collects the same player as you, I think in that sense, like not worried. It's just more like, oh, cool. Like here's a person who I could work together on and like collect the same player with, and it's kind of fun right there, or form new hobby friendships or something like that. So I think use those relationships in a way for your both your advantages, but not really worried about what other people are collecting. More just, I guess, be aware again of what people are collecting and see like, oh, that's really cool. Like maybe that's a card that I could maybe get one day, like maybe set a goal, or maybe if they're downsizing their collection, cool. Like maybe this is somewhere in the future that I can like add to my own collection as well. So, or again, if you're in the player collector boat, not worried at all, just using that person like almost like a collecting ally in a way. So you shouldn't really be worried about what people collect, but like definitely be aware of it and try not to stress out too much. I know I did that a little bit when I was younger. Like, oh, this person collects the same player as me. Oh man, like they're kind of like a friend of me a little bit, and they're probably going to outbid me, or their collection is just way better than mine. Like what's the point a little bit? So that definitely happened to me a little bit for sure, if I'm being honest. And so not just take it from me, don't be worried about it, and just really have fun. So you should definitely not be worried at all what other people are collecting, but be aware of it. Might give you some ideas. Next question is, should I put much stock into various hobby trends? I would think similar to last question, actually, like yes and no. No, in the sense that you don't want to like drop everything and just rush after, the latest and greatest trend. I've seen that too. People jump on a player bandwagon, or, they jump on a particular set, or something like that. I saw a lot of people, with the PMG craze. They're collecting a lot of PMGs, and you have a whole bunch of people becoming a set collector. And PMGs are awesome, as Eric just showed one on camera. But also, I'm seeing now a little bit, a lot of people are trying to sell them, and they're great cards, and you'll definitely make a cool profit on them for sure, depending on when you collected them. But a lot of people are trying to downsize a little bit and thinking, you know what, I kind of jumped on the trend a little bit. And for those people who genuinely like PNGs and just found out about them, or just kind of renewed their liking for them, that's totally cool. And I'm sure you ended up with a great collection. But for those who didn't, they're kind of paying the price a little bit, and they find themselves with these whole bit of cards that they now have to unload. So that is not really a good thing. But I think being aware of the trends is good, because it gives you, a look at the hobby landscape and it says, say the new thing is PMGs, like maybe you're a new collector and you're like, hey, those look really cool. Maybe I am going to collect the set, or whatever it is, or a new player is on the scene and you're like, man, I really want to collect their cards. Honestly, depending on the collector, that could be very, very genuine, and I don't want to disapprove of that mindset at all. And who knows, like maybe it could end up with a really cool, you know 5-10 year journey for this collection, because of a certain player trend, so to speak, in the hobby. A fresh new rookie, we see it every year. And so sometimes trends can be good, and it could fast track someone into, discovering what they really want to collect. But, go through it with a little bit of hesitancy, as I struggle to say that word. But just be aware that, like all trends, eventually they do end. And so you just got to be aware that, okay, this might be a new avenue for me for my collection, or this could be my very first introduction into the hobby or these types of cards. And you just kind of got to ask yourself, when this trend does end, and it will, do I want to see this out for the long haul? Whether it's a personal set completion that you want to try, or a player collector, team collector that's really hot right now, or they just want a cup or something, that's totally cool. But just be aware that eventually the trend you're following will, end, and you just got to be aware of that, and hopefully be willing to stick it out. So just be aware of trends if you want to follow it. So I say yes, it's a good thing, but just be careful with them for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good answer. Yeah, I would echo again a lot of what you said. I think having that awareness of it is definitely the first and probably most important aspect of that. Sometimes it's very easy to recognize trends, like you were saying with the PMGs over the last 6 months or so. Obviously, they have, really taken off in hockey. And I'm sure a lot of people would say they were undervalued. The old ones were undervalued, and maybe now people would say now they're overvalued on the opposite end of the spectrum. So yeah, the awareness of those trends is obviously very important. And I think also understanding how that may or may not affect you and your collecting. There are certainly trends that come and go that, you might say, yeah, like this is a trend that's happening, but it really doesn't affect me all that much. So like, whatever, like that's something other people are doing and I couldn't care less because it just doesn't really affect me at all. Whereas there are some things that definitely do affect you, and you kind of have to determine, okay, how much am I don't know if saying get caught up in it is necessarily the right way of putting it, but for sake of the conversation, how much are you getting caught up in this trend? And, sometimes there are things that you just can't avoid. Like for me, I have Jalmerson, Slavin, and Dzingel were all in Metal Universe, so they all have PMGs. So, for me, it was, yeah, like they all have these cards. I need to get them in order to, be fulfilling my goal as a player collector. Thankfully, none of them had the retro PMGs because those are the ones that hold a lot more value. But it's still having that understanding of, even though these players aren't necessarily the most desirable, just based on what the card is, it is desirable to more people than, say, a similar type of parallel from another product. The card that I showed on camera to Aaron earlier, I got a Slavin green PMG in the mail the other day. And, to me, it's important to have that understanding of, okay, this is a parallel numbered out of 10, but this is probably a more desirable card to have than, say, even like an Upper Deck High Gloss numbered out of 10, from the same year, just because there is kind of that big focus and a lot of attention on PMGs right now. That's a more desirable card. So sometimes you might have to make a stronger play if you really want to get that card or whatever it might be. And one other thing, kind of taking it completely to the opposite side of the conversation, and again, this goes back to the awareness, but sometimes you might get lucky in the sense that you have something and then there's a trend toward whatever that is. Understanding that this is a trend, so it is okay to capitalize on that trend, on that opportunity to quote unquote sell high on whatever that might be. You guys probably remember, using the PMG thing again, I pulled that Leon Draisaitl retro green PMG on the show. And to me and to you, Aaron, like that card doesn't mean a whole lot to either of us. Like it was a beautiful card, very nice card, but we don't value that card as much as other people do. So it was important to recognize that and capitalize on that opportunity to move it. So, I think just like Aaron said, having the awareness of it is first and foremost. That's really the most important thing in terms of how you then move forward with it. And, that awareness is oftentimes going to kind of determine how you react to it. I would say most collectors that have a good idea of their standing in the hobby are able to fairly accurately navigate trends. I don't feel like there's too many like serious devoted collectors that get caught up in every single trend that happens because they know better. And not every trend is going to appeal to every collector. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I have too much more to say about it other than that. Like Aaron said, it's very important to be aware of them and understand how those trends may or may not affect you. So moving on to the next one, this is definitely a different kind of topic, but one that's very, very important, especially nowadays, I would say. That being, how do I fit into the hobby community? That's a very interesting question to think about because I don't know that there's necessarily like a right or wrong answer, but I think probably the biggest thing is understanding that the hobby as a whole is a big community, and understanding that you are just, at the end of the day, another collector out of millions around the world that collect hockey cards. So understanding that, being aware of that, sometimes you can view that positively, sometimes you can view that negatively, but understanding that this is, at the end of the day, a community, and that other people that are collecting matter. And I think kind of trying to be as good of a member of the hobby community as you can is really important, because if you're not, and all you're doing is just focusing on yourself, you're probably honestly limiting your enjoyment level in the hobby for a number of reasons. I mean, there's so many advantages of being an active and positive member of the hobby community. So, and we've talked about that previously, but yeah, I think kind of just like having that awareness of, hey, this hobby as a whole is certainly much larger than I am, and it's not just about me. And having that outlook and saying, hey, if I can be having fun, and along the way, if I can be helping other people, that's awesome. And I think you guys will certainly realize that if you're doing that, you're probably actually going to be increasing the amount of fun that you're having, because helping someone else get a card they want or need or whatever is honestly a lot of fun, sometimes even more fun than getting a card that you want for yourself. So, like I know, even going back to that one of a kind patch for you, Aaron, like that was one of the more fun cards that I've received in the mail recently, just because I know how much you wanted that. And, of course, like it wasn't my card. It wasn't, I just paid for it and sent it to you. Like I didn't really do that much, but it was just fun to be a little piece of that, and know that that's a card that you'll cherish for many, many years to come. So yeah, I think just having that outlook of, this is a lot bigger than just me, and trying to be a good member of the community, whatever that looks like, is really important. I mean, it's kind of like how life is in general. You want to be a good neighbor, you want to be a good coworker, you want to be a good friend, all those things, that those are all very important things. And you kind of just apply that same mentality to the hobby and see where it leads you.
I really like that take. I love that overview, that theorized take of what it takes to be, a good community member. I'm going to take it a little bit in a different direction and kind of have like, ground rules of what maybe that looks like. Like don't be a jerk. First off, like don't be a jerk. Like no community of any sort, like whether it be a neighborhood community, like no one likes a basket weaving jerk. So don't do that. No one likes getting scammed, like phone scams, email scams, text messaging scams. No one likes scams. So if you're in a hobby community, don't scam people. Pay on time. If you're buying something, pay on time. If you're trading, ship it out on time. That's how you fit into a hobby community. Like don't be a jerk, and just try to emulate what you would want done to you in return. I think that's really key too. Would you like people to help you find cards maybe for your collection? Great. If you see something that someone else would like maybe reach out a bit, share what you collect, if you can, if you have the time, congratulate others on their awesome collections or a new piece or whatever that might look like. That's how you really fit into a hobby community of any sort, and especially with cards, especially since you've seen a lot of new people in the hobby too. And so it's really important to have that really good community outlook, I think, for new or returning members of the hobby. So yeah, rule number 1 and 2 and 3 and a million, just don't be a jerk. And I think you'll fit in pretty well. All right, next question. Why does it matter if the hobby has a good community? That's a really good point. Why does it matter? I mean, I don't know, it just makes it more fun. I mean, like Eric's opinion, just kind of at the tail end of it, it just makes it so fun. Like if everyone is not a jerk and just has a lot of fun and helps each other out, it could honestly, like Eric said, just make collecting so much more fun. It was never like this for me for the majority of my collecting, I guess, career. But now, with social media, especially, like if I get a new card in the mail or something, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And that appeases myself and 10-year-old me, that's awesome. But, there's a new element, now I can share it with people. And that's a cool element too. So that's why having a good community matters. So if you can, be an asset to that, it helps yourself, it helps other people, and it doesn't help the bunch of jerks. And it's really important. So as the Carolina Hurricanes would say, bunch of jerks. So don't be like that.
Very true. I was going to make that clarification that we're not talking about the Hurricanes, but
no, but we are though a little bit. Bunch
we
of
were,
jerks.
we were
for like 10 seconds. Yeah,
true.
Hurricanes are fine. They're not jerks.
Very true, especially a certain somebody. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I think, that's certainly, a very good point. One other thing, kind of going back to what I was talking about, with that example of that Enroth card, like for me, I guess I do have an Enroth card or two, but that's never something, like if I just saw that Enroth card on eBay, I never would have just bought it for myself. There's no reason for me to do that. It's not what I collect. But the fact that, I know that somebody else, in this case, Aaron, really appreciates that card, makes me appreciate it too. And I can enjoy, kind of that experience of it too. And say, hey, I know this is a really meaningful card for somebody else, and just kind of enjoy that card for what it is. And, I have that happen all the time. I think I've mentioned it on the show. I have a few buddies that live up north of the border by you, Aaron, that we kind of have deals where, oh, if this card is being sold by an American seller, then Eric buys it, accumulates all these cards, and then sends them to you up in Canada, and vice versa. So there's a few people that I do that for pretty regularly. And honestly, I probably get, combined for those guys, I probably get more mail for them than I do for myself. And almost all of the time, those are cards that I would never buy for myself, but I get to enjoy them and, just say, hey, this is a really cool card. Even though it's maybe not something that, would fit in my collection, it's still a really cool card. And I know that, it's something they really enjoy and appreciate. And that's really cool. So, like even today, got a pretty cool Roberto Luongo card in the mail for Chris Pryor, a good buddy. So, again, card that I would never buy for myself. I've never even had a card from the set that card came from. So just being able to see one and hold one in my hands and just be like, yeah, that's a cool card. Just helps you kind of enjoy it and kind of diversify your outlook on the hobby a little bit, give you a little bit broader of a lens on being aware of certain cards. And, yeah, like you said, Aaron, if you're helping other people, you're probably going to be getting more enjoyment just from, the sheer nature of you're helping somebody. That in and of itself should give you some degree of enjoyment. And, then, yeah, if you're able to enjoy a cool card for a little while, through that process, even better. So, yeah, I think, like we said, obviously having the hobby have a good community is very important, just because, not only does it benefit you, but it obviously benefits other people. And through that, it's just going to make it a much more enjoyable experience all around for everybody. So I think that's what everybody should want. So, it's just a matter of kind of figuring out how to do that and be more intentional about it. And, some people are really good at it, and some people, like Aaron alluded to, are not very good at it. So just having that awareness, and maybe that means, hey, I'm going to go out of my way and try to identify somebody on social media that collects a certain player. And from now on, if I see a rare card of that player, I'm going to let them know. That's a first step that you can take that will very much build toward building a better community. So if you guys don't do that, I would strongly encourage you to do that. If you need an example of, people or players to collect, who we both collect. So you could, keep an eye out for us. But
Yeah, you definitely help me out. For sure.
Yeah, but no, I mean, in all seriousness, you can go on social media and, very quickly find player collectors, set collectors, whatever it might be, and pretty quickly learn, oh, this person is very serious about this kind of card. So I'm going to try to help them on their quest. And like Aaron said, it's cyclical. If you start kind of making it known that you're looking out for other people are going to, return that favor and do it for you too, which again is probably going to help you enjoy the hobby even more as well.
Another thing that I was actually just thinking is, being part of a good community also gives you access to a lot of knowledge in the hobby too, from just people posting about certain cards or educating you on certain sets of the past, or just a little bit of, hobby history sprinkled throughout, and why, cards exist, or, a certain story about this card or that card. It just gives you, access to a lot of knowledge. And so that's another reason why having a good community is important, both for current up-to-date knowledge and also just for stuff from the past that maybe makes you like a card or set even more. So just thought I would add that in really, really quick.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. One example of that immediately comes to my mind is that Gretzky Red Rooster card. That's something I don't know that I was aware of that card prior to you mentioning it, whenever you did back in the fall or whenever it was that you got the short hair version. I don't think that I had been aware of those cards, or at least if I was, I didn't know the significance behind them. So yeah, being able to learn from each other is obviously a critically important aspect of the hobby for sure. So good point there. For the next question, that being, what goals should I have for collecting? Again, this is a very broad question that, is going to look different for every single person. You're going to have different goals than everybody else, pretty much. I mean, maybe some people have some of the same goals or similar goals or whatever it might be, but, everybody has their own unique things about them and their collection. So first and foremost, that's something to keep in mind. And that kind of relates to some of the things we've talked about earlier. But what goals should you have? Again, it depends on that context. If you're a player collector, maybe you say, I want to collect every card of that player. Maybe you say, I want to collect everything but printing plates. I want to collect everything but one of ones. I just want to collect their rookie year cards. I just want to collect, autograph cards of them, whatever it might be. There's a number of ways to player collect. It doesn't just have to be super collecting, 100% completion, all that. Set collecting, obviously, that's generally more about finishing the set, but even sometimes there's some variance within that as well. Team collecting, I think, is a very broad one, because realistically, there's no way you can ever collect every card of a certain team, even if it's the Seattle Kraken. Maybe right now you could have a 100% complete collection of the Kraken, just because there's very, very, very few cards of the Kraken. It's pretty much just like promotional cards from Upper Deck at this point. But short of the Kraken, I guess, it's impossible to have a 100% complete card collection of any given team. So again, there are so many different ways that can go. You could say, I want every true rookie card of my favorite team. I want, whatever it might be. There's so many ways you could go with team collecting. But again, the answer to this question is going to go back to what you enjoy collecting. And when you do figure out what it is that you enjoy collecting, that's probably going to quickly determine what your goals are and what those look like. And again, those will change over time, and that's perfectly healthy and normal and good, honestly, because if you just have the same goal and say eventually you reach that goal and you don't collect anything else, you don't have any other ambitions or anything in the hobby, then, well, that's it. I guess I'm done. So, I think it's good to always kind of be striving for new things and kind of changing your goals a little bit. Not changing, but just kind of, maybe adding different things, or, if you have a different outlook on something now than you used to have, and it might shift kind of what your mentality is about a goal or your collection or whatever it might be. So, yeah, it's going to depend on every single person. But like I said, what you enjoy collecting is largely going to determine what those goals are. Now, one thing I would say about this is it's very important for your goals to be realistic within reason. I mean, you want something that is not just going to be super easy, because if you do just have very simple goals, well, there's nothing wrong with that. If you just have, a few very small goals and you achieve those, then it's like, okay, well, now what do I do? And if you don't have other goals to be working toward, then it's like, well, I guess that's it. So I think it's good to always kind of be building those goals and, have them be something that is attainable within reason, but is still something that you definitely have to work toward. For me, being a player super collector, there really isn't an end to that. Is it really realistic to have 100% of Jalmerson's cards, of Slavin's cards, of Dzingle's cards? No, like it's not. There are some guys that it's, I would say at this point, Dzingel is probably the most likely of the three that I would ever get to 100% of, just because I do have the majority of his one of ones. But, there are some that I don't have. So in that sense, you're probably never going to actually accomplish that goal. So because of that, you're always still striving toward it, but also, have that understanding of, yeah, I'm probably not going to achieve this. And don't let that, upset you or discourage you, but, let it fuel you toward it and saying, I can still always be working toward it and be enjoying that process. So there's that kind of component of it. And then another kind of side of that, kind of more of a concrete goal that has an end to it, like a set collection. I think that is, definitely a very healthy thing too, because that can kind of give you that sense of accomplishment when you do reach the end. Like for me with my 0304 master collection, like that's an extremely daunting project that I knew when I made that goal, that was probably going to be a 10 plus year project, probably more than that. And that's great because it constantly is giving me something to work toward. If I am unable to find rare cards of my players that I need, I can always turn to the 0304 project and say, okay, maybe, this month I'm going to try to get a Flurry rookie card or something. There's always something to be working toward with that project, while still understanding that I do hope one day that I will be done with that project, because that's the goal. I want to have all of those cards, and when I get the last card, that's the end of the project. So, I think having that balance is really important, and having a variety of goals is also very important.
Well said. Well said. I mean, in a nutshell, you spoke about a lot of these points I'm about to say, so I'm not going to repeat them all. But as far as like setting goals for your collection, you touched on some of these a little bit. But number one for me would be obviously being affordable to you and your budget. I think that's number one as well. Having a reasonable time frame. You touched on that. Not having one that's too short or too long, because I think that can lead to burnout, especially if you're not an experienced collector. Taking on a 10-year project, if you're just starting out, probably won't feel too fun. So I think something manageable from where you're at in the hobby, and obviously going back to what we spoke about earlier, but it has to be something, whatever it is, player collector, like you talked about, set or team collector. That subject has to be something that you really enjoy. And so I think all of these three combined, if you go at it correctly, I think you'll have appropriate goals that you can hopefully just crush it and achieve every single one of them. Unless you're going for 100% completion of a player. Like we said, that's pretty unrealistic. So have realistic goals, have it be affordable to you, have something you enjoy, and in a reasonable time frame. I think that's a good way to go at it. So I think that's really fair. Last question for this segment. Actually, we have one after that, but one last question for this little segment. How do I stay motivated to collect in the midst of widespread negativity in the hobby? We've seen this a lot, the diehards smashing together with the new people or people coming back in. It's just been this negativity stuff. People, collectors who've collected a lot in other sports coming over into hockey and just sort of this massive mashup of different sports and different collections, different backgrounds in collecting, different experience levels, all mashing into this pot of sometimes negativity, which is unfortunate. So, how do you manage that? How do you stay motivated? For me, I try to ignore all of that. I try not to get too much involved in that sort of stuff one on one, but you're aware of it, it's out there. But for me, I just try to push it aside and just kind of keep following, my own path and what I enjoy collecting. I think it's really fun. I said that off the top, but that's what kind of keeps me going, just that original, I guess, nostalgia, why I started collecting in the first place, collect like no one's watching. I think that's, the good part about it for me. And, whether you have an audience or not, just collect the cards you enjoy. And I think that does a lot in kind of pushing away all that negativity and at the same time keeping you motivated as well. So I think that's, my way of going about it. I'm not sure if you guys can relate at all, but that's how I kind of go about it, kind of silently sort of trudging my way through, I guess. So Eric, I'm not sure if you have a little different opinion of how you go about that, but yeah, would love to hear your thoughts for sure. Like, I know you're a little bit more involved than I am, which is good, powerhouse, all that knowledge, using it for good, like a superhero, like a card collecting superhero. You're probably going to hate me for saying that, but I think it's a good example. You're a superhero of cards tackling these card villains. So I'm going to stop talking now, but you can go ahead.
I like the card villain comment. That's very accurate. Yeah, I mean, I think I certainly will get involved with comment threads and stuff on social media for various reasons. A lot of times that's because someone is saying something that factually is not accurate. And, with so many new collectors in the hobby, I think there is legitimate value in trying to provide accurate information. I mean, that's part of why we have this podcast, right? So
Exactly.
Part of that for me is that mentality of, I want people to know, correct information about the hobby that they're partaking in. And, I think that's really important. And if I do have that information and knowledge that I can share with other people, great. A lot of people don't have the right mindset in the hobby and don't want to learn and don't want to be corrected. And that kind of goes back to what Aaron was saying, people are jerks and stuff. And that can ultimately, become a very negative experience for the people that are actively participating in the conversation and also just those people that are viewing the conversation. And that can certainly be very frustrating, especially when people start just, like you said, being jerks, calling each other names. And I don't understand why people do that, but I obviously don't go that far. I stick to the information. If someone wants to argue a fact with me, I'll just say, okay, that's not correct. Like, this is the fact. If you don't want to accept that, I don't know what else to tell you. That's your problem. So yeah, I certainly do get involved with stuff like that fairly regularly, probably more than I should, honestly. But it is what it is. But what I was envisioning with this question when I put it on the outline is, I know that there are longtime collectors that have become frustrated with what the hobby has become in the last couple of years, with this focus more on, the monetary component of the hobby, with, certain card values just exploding over the last few years and that negatively affecting them and their collecting. And, as a result, just being frustrated and kind of feeling burnt out and, why am I even doing this? And, while I don't know that I necessarily ever have that extreme of feelings toward it, there are certainly days where I do, find myself being discouraged with, whatever, maybe a certain interaction or maybe a card such as the Jacob Slavin Golden Treasures card that we showed off last time that went for way more money than it's worth. that was obviously very frustrating for me. But at the end of the day, in instances like that, I just tell myself, you got to step back, take a step back, think about why you are doing this. This is something that you really enjoy. This is something that's fun for you. So just remember that. This is a hobby. It's supposed to be fun. And if you ever find yourself not having fun, I think it's really important to, as quickly as possible, recognize that. And then whatever you need to do to remind yourself why you're collecting, I think is the most important thing you can do. Sometimes for me, that means just coming in my office and pulling out a few nice cards that I really enjoy looking at, or, cards that are meaningful to me, or whatever it might be. And if you do that, I know when I do it, it, definitely kind of just reminds me of, hey, I still love doing this. Like, this is awesome. I love this card. It looks really cool. It's a meaningful card, whatever it might be. It just kind of reminds you of why you're doing this, and, why you put the time and the effort and the money into doing it. And, I think that's a really good way of handling that negativity, because like we said, yes, it is important to, be interacting with people and have that community aspect. But when that aspect of the hobby turns negative and frustrating, then it is perfectly fine and good to take that step back and just kind of reflect and focus more on yourself and your collection. And, then when you're kind of ready to go back into the community and stuff, great. And sometimes that might mean for someone, I'm going to not actively focus on my collecting for a week or two or a month or whatever it might be. You take a short break. That's fine. I don't think I've ever done that, but I know certain people certainly have, and it's been really beneficial for them. So that's another thing that you could do. But yeah, just trying to remove yourself from that when you need to, and find a way that reminds you why you enjoy collecting. I think is the best way to confront that and maintain that motivation, and for moving forward in your collecting, and pursuing your goals and things like that, so that you are getting that enjoyment and the fun out of the hobby that you do know that deep down you do enjoy. So I think that's all I have to say on that one. Those were all of the questions and topics that we had thought of. But as some of you saw on social media earlier this week, we did ask you guys to provide some questions if you guys had anything that you wanted to hear us talk about. So we did have a few people that gave us some questions and topics to talk about related to kind of this, outlook and mentality toward the hobby as a whole. So the first one, I did just want to give this guy a shout out in particular, because he's actually a brand new listener of ours who just found us very recently, and just wanted to give him a shout out. He's Stay at Home Thad on Instagram. So Thad, hope you're doing well. Appreciate you being a supporter now, and a listener and all that. So just want to give you a shout out. And he asked, and I thought this was a really, really good question. So I'm glad that he asked it and that we can talk about it, because I wouldn't have thought of it, but it's a really good question. So, and especially in the context of the hobby over the last couple of years. So his question is, how are people like me, those who used to collect cards a ton when they were younger, got away from it for several years and have since come back into it? He said he just got back into collecting 3 months ago, but I'm going to open it up to, people that came back into the hobby since the pandemic started, because that's really what we've seen, in the hobby. So with that context, how are people like me received by the diehards? Great question. To me, obviously, it's very exciting having people wanting to come back and, remembering that experience they had as a child and how much fun they had with it, and wanting to, rekindle that flame, so to speak, and, see if, they can enjoy it again. And, obviously, I'm sure those people that are coming back now after years away are probably probably blown away by what the hobby is now, with what cards are, and just the variety of cards and price of cards, and, everything associated with the hobby nowadays. It's very different than it was, even 10 years ago. So, I'm sure there are plenty of people that stopped collecting in the 90s that are just now coming back, that are just like, their minds are blown by how insanely different the hobby is from what they remember. So for me, obviously, like I said, it's exciting that people want to come back and get involved in it again. To me, I think and I've told this to a few other people that have asked me this question privately, but to me, I think the most important thing is those collectors that are coming back, and this applies to just brand new collectors as well, but anyone entering the hobby, I think it's critically important that you are willing to learn about what the hobby is and learn how things work and kind of learn the right way of doing things, so to speak. I mean, you could argue there's no right way of doing things, but like Aaron said, like, don't be a jerk. Like, being a jerk is not the right way to do things. But, I think there's extreme value in that, because if you are just kind of going out and trying to figure it out, you might. But if you're actively trying to learn about the hobby, asking questions, trying to make those connections with other collectors, pick their brains on things, that's going to help you in your collecting so much, because you're going to just know more about what you're doing, and therefore you're going to be able to enjoy it more. So I think that's a critical component of it, especially because there are new collectors that, I don't know if I would say intentionally don't do that, but they clearly do not do that and just make all kinds of assumptions about the hobby and how things work. And, I'm sure you guys have experienced people like that, and you'll notice that a lot of the time their assumptions are wrong. And that can just be a very frustrating experience. So I think if you're getting back into the hobby, having that right mindset of, I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to learn what to do, that's great. That's how it should be, I think. So, and for you, Thad, like, you're listening to us, we appreciate that. Hopefully we're giving you some good pointers and good advice, and you're learning some stuff from us. Just based on that, I think you have the right mindset, and I think you'll probably find yourself enjoying the hobby here moving forward. But yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that you would want to add there, Aaron? I think that kind of summarizes my thoughts pretty well. Just trying to actively learn and have that growth mindset, rather than just having it be, I'm getting back into collecting, I'm just going to do my thing and do whatever the heck I want and don't care about anybody else.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, how are people going to receive new collectors like him, after many years, or, for the first time ever? I think very well. I think overall, when I hear that a collector's new, I think, hey, that's awesome, or someone like messages you or something like, hey, I'm new, like, what should I do, or something like that. I think is really cool. First off, hey, welcome. Hi. It's always really fun. So I think that if you're staying at home and you're wondering, how are people going to receive me as a new collector, hopefully the good ones will receive you very positively, and we'll get you set up on your way. You can look for us for that. If you have any questions, feel free, but hopefully very well. And I think some people like to gatekeep some hobbies a little bit and kind of keep the new people out, but personally, I don't think that's what it's all about. Anyone who wants to be here can definitely be here. So that's totally cool. So I think just receive with open arms should be the way to do it if you're looking for how you should be received. Next question by Josh Packham, friend of the show, pretty much godfather of the show, just legend of the show. We haven't had him on here, but he is a huge listener. And that's why we're still doing this. We're doing this for Josh. So hi, Josh, if you're listening, which I know you are. We've never met, but thanks for being a friend of the show. Anyway, here's a question. So he wants to understand why other people feel the need to bid on / purchase cards and hold them hostage when they don't collect that player or set. Josh, I have no idea why they do this. I have no clue. I have no answers. I have no theories. Well, I have theories, but I honestly, at the end of the day, I don't know. I don't know. I wish I knew, but I don't. It's sad, when you see that stuff. First of all, I want to get a big difference between buying cards they don't necessarily collect and holding them hostage. I think there's a very big difference. If someone buys a card because they think it looks cool and wants to keep it forever, that's cool. And if it's a one of one card that I really want, well, that's just tough luck for me, because they wanted it and they traded for it or whatever, and they got it, or they pulled it out of a pack. That's cool. And they have every right to do that. And that's fair. And that's what makes this hobby so cool. However, there's a big difference between that and what some people do. There's a seller on COMC, he who shall not be named, as we're going to call him here. People who've been in the hobby know who he is. Well, maybe not know who he is. The guy's like a ghost, but they know the username I'm talking about. And he buys cards for a crazy amount of money and does not collect that stuff at all. I've heard from people who do know him, and he just gets a kick out of it just by overpaying for stuff. I don't know what this guy does or what, I don't know. But, he just likes buying cards that other people collect. He surfs the hobby. He doesn't address himself, but he knows who has hardcore followings of certain players, and he'll buy up these cards, no joke, just to hold it over people's heads that he has it and they don't. It's really, maybe that's been done on a smaller scale or various dealings where they'll move the card, but maybe not to this person for whatever reason. But this is deliberately like it's borderline evil, folks. It's I've been caught on the wrong end of that, and so have many others. But it's downright evil and mean. I don't know why they do that, but the best thing to do in that scenario for me is just look at the stuff that I do have versus the stuff I don't have, and it clearly, it works for me, and it helps me kind of forget about those instances. But as opposed to why, or if you want to understand that, I don't know either, so I can't really give an answer. But borderline evil. But hopefully eventually that stops, and overall in the hobby, like 98%, people don't usually do that. Or if they do have a card that they're not going to trade away or sell for whatever reason, I think overall that's okay. But as long as you're not a jerk about it, it's okay. But yeah, I can't really give an answer, Josh, but it's a good question. I don't know.
It's the $1,000,000 question, perhaps the multi-million-dollar question for that specific individual. The answer is because they're a jerk, and that's not the hobby. So, to me, those people are not collectors. They're not members of the hobby. They're their own thing. That's not the hobby at all. So, yeah, I don't want to get too triggered talking about this. I have yet to be on the wrong end of that. I know, Aaron, you have. I'm sure one day I probably will be too, but it's unfortunate. It's sad. It's like I said, that's not the hobby. So there's not much you can say about people like that. So moving on to greener pastures, another good buddy of the show, Kurt Johnson, he asked a very good question that, I know he specifically does not want the question to be answered for himself, but this is more just to address the topic as a whole for, kind of the hobby as a whole. Should I collect unlicensed cards and products like President's Choice and Leaf? Now, I think, I certainly have an answer. I know Aaron has an answer too, but I think it's important to understand the context of where each collector is coming from when they're answering this question, because Upper Deck, being the sole licensed manufacturer of NHL cards currently, and President's Choice and Leaf have very different target markets. So it's very important to understand that. If you are a super collector of Alexis Lafreniere, then no, you're probably not going to be very interested in what President's Choice and Leaf has to offer, because they don't have Lafreniere cards, and that's just not what they do. So it's very important to understand the context of each collector, what your goal is for collecting, like we talked about earlier. That said, if you do collect things that are, done by companies like President's Choice and Leaf, should you collect those cards? It's a good question. Yes, those companies do not have a license. That's a fact. But because of that, there are also, in a lot of ways, positives to that, because they're able to offer some things that companies like Upper Deck can't offer. Not purely just because they're unlicensed. That's not what I'm saying, but they, take advantage of the opportunity to kind of have a little bit more free reign on more unique things, and, not necessarily being tied down to like a certain structure, so to speak. So obviously, anyone that is experienced within the hobby knows President's Choice, which is owned by Dr. Brian Price, who used to be the president of In the Game. So President's Choice, and then Leaf, who bought out In the Game from Dr. Price. Those two companies very much specialize on retired vintage, legend memorabilia. That's really what those companies do. They do have cards, of course, of more recent and even current players, but they're known for that retired legend vintage stuff. So in that regard, yes, you can certainly get memorabilia cards of retired players from Upper Deck, absolutely. But, like I said, vintage specifically, you're just not going to see that super often from Upper Deck. So if you're into vintage memorabilia, President's Choice and Leaf is 110% the way to go, because those companies pretty much have the market cornered on vintage memorabilia. And there's just things that they can offer that a licensed manufacturer like Upper Deck just can't offer, period. Like for me, being a George Vezina collector, you're never going to see a George Vezina memorabilia card from Upper Deck. Why? Because they don't have his memorabilia. Fact. So if you want a George Vezina memorabilia card, you don't have a licensed, well, I guess you do have a license option with vintage in the game stuff, but for current stuff, you don't have that option. It's if you want a new Vezina memorabilia card, you have to get it from President's Choice or Leaf. So, I think there are obviously extreme cases, so to speak, like that. But even if you're just looking at, a current player like Connor McDavid or something, companies like Leaf put out very nice cards of Connor McDavid as well. If you guys saw the top 10 cards from 2021 episode right at the end of 2021, you might remember a jumbo sock card that I have of McDavid from Leaf in the Game Used. And, that's a card that I thoroughly enjoy. It's a really, really nice card. And does it being unlicensed bother me? Honestly, no, like not at all. Some people might say, well, it's not licensed, so they can't use the player's photo. In some cases, it doesn't have any logos on it, and for some people that's a deal breaker. And okay, I understand sometimes those limitations can, kind of limit the eye appeal of a card. I totally understand that. But that doesn't mean that the card is worthless or that it's junk or it's fake or, whatever words you see thrown around online. There's still, definitely a level of desirability to those cards. And, like I said, and a lot of times companies like President's Choice and Leaf kind of have to go above and beyond with what they do well in order to make those cards, worthwhile for collectors since they aren't licensed. So, for example, that McDavid card, it's an incredibly nice looking card that has a huge piece of a game used McDavid sock, 3 colors. It's a really nice card. That far outweighs to me the fact that he's not pictured on the card. Would it be nice if he was? Absolutely. He's not. That's okay. It's a really nice card. So, they understand their limitations. They have to work around a lot of things. But generally speaking, they do a really good job of doing that, making really appealing, interesting, unique cards for collectors. And a lot of the time, like I said, it's things that you won't see done by a licensed manufacturer. So, Kurt, like I said, I know you aren't specifically looking for an answer because I know you love President's Choice and Leaf yourself. But, for people that do have that question of, oh, what are President's Choice and Leaf about? Like I don't see their cards all that often, or, what's this all about? Yeah, don't write them off just because they're unlicensed. They offer a lot. Generally speaking, the value of their products is pretty strong. And yeah, I would definitely encourage anybody to check out cards from either of those manufacturers. Find a card of a player or team you like, a design that you like, whatever it might be, and just go from there. If you try it and it's not your thing, that's fine, no problem, you gave it a shot. But yeah, just to kind of blanket write off unlicensed card manufacturers just because they don't have a license doesn't really make sense to me, unless you are, like I said, like a Lafreniere super collector and there literally aren't cards from those manufacturers. That's completely understandable. But if those manufacturers do have something that could be of interest to you, give them a shot, because I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised.
I think you summed it up perfectly to Kurt's question. Yeah, just to kind of sum up all of that, as far as President's Choice and Leaf, and formerly in the game, if you want to collect cards from the past, some of their unlicensed stuff, just unlicensed cards as a whole, honestly, in that case, just let the cards do the talking. If you're kind of on the fence about it, go on eBay or whatever and look up cards from these different companies, like get a feel for different products that are out there and just search them up and let the cards do the talking. Are you going to like every one of them? No, but you can say that about every set or any company. But you're going to find some really, really strong cards that you can't get anywhere else, like Eric said. And I think we both came in on the positive end, as far as our collections go, when, buying Leaf or President's Choice cards or formerly in the game, and just have been very, very surprised, and not surprised, I shouldn't say surprised, just really very happy with the final product. License or not, honestly, at this point in the game, for me, pun totally intended, it doesn't matter at this point. And I just think if someone wants to write off cards just because they're not licensed, I think they're doing themselves a disservice. I can't tell anyone what to collect. That's pretty much the whole point of this episode. But just give those cards a chance. And I know Kurt definitely does. We talked about this before the podcast started, but Kurt definitely does enjoy Leaf and does enjoy President's Choice and enjoyed in the game cards so much that he actually went above and beyond. He used to be a very big Marion Gabbert collector. I believe he just has a bunch of his cards still. And it was actually a really cool story. One time he was conversing with Brian Price, at the time was the president of In the Game, and he really wanted Marion Gabbert cards using a particular stick, or just stick cards in general. I forget exactly what the context was. And he actually had in his collection a game-used Marion Gabbert stick, full stick. And he decided, the passionate card collector that he is, and what he wanted to see represented in his collection, various cards, various teams, various different types of memorabilia. He decided to actually make a deal with Dr. Price saying, if I send you in this game-used stick of Marion Gabbert, will you make stick cards of them? And, they agreed upon some stuff, and he was in, I believe, a stick work set. And I believe the set that his stick was mainly featured in was like this stick rack set out of 24. And so it was a really cool story. Like he actually tried to almost like recreate his stick that he had in card form, because he knew that the stick is legit. It's in my collection and I really enjoy these cards. I wanted to see it. So why not contribute to that myself through my collection in order to see more cards in my collection added? I thought that was a really cool story. And he's also donated gloves, jersey as well. It's just a really cool story where, like, it's an interesting question, like, would I ever do that kind of thing? Because it's a really good story about, wanting certain cards represented in your collection and really going on, the extra mile in order to make that happen. So I know Kurt has done that. Kudos to him for doing that for sure. He definitely does not mind collecting unlicensed cards because their memorabilia is really top notch. So just thought I'd share that little story to end off these little questions, which have been amazing.
Yeah, very cool story. Hopefully you don't mind us sharing that one, Kurt. One other thing that I wanted to add to a huge benefit that I would say to collecting unlicensed cards versus licensed cards. Generally speaking, I would say this is basically just a fact across the board, is if you are buying an unlicensed card, that card will very likely cost less because it's unlicensed. Like, that's it. If that was a licensed card, it would likely be more valuable. That's just a fact. That's just the territory of what it is. There is a wider market for those licensed cards. So there are fewer people buying the unlicensed cards, fewer people, competing for those unlicensed cards, fewer people actively searching for those unlicensed cards. So, as a result, they just tend to sell for cheaper. So in a lot of ways, that can be a huge positive as a collector, because you can get those really quality pieces for a lot cheaper than you could argue should be, if they were made by Upper Deck or, a different licensed manufacturer back in the day or whatever it might be. So I think that's just something to be mindful of as well. Maybe say, I would really like a nice Gordie Howe card, memorabilia card for my collection. And, you might find a really nice patch card from Upper Deck, and you might find a really nice patch card from Leaf. And odds are probably pretty good that that Leaf card is going to be cheaper than the Upper Deck card. And the Leaf card might even have a better patch than the Upper Deck card might. And you're still going to get it for cheaper. So, there's a huge advantage in that regard in the fact that you can get some very good deals just for, what you are actually buying. One thing that I always kind of say with this stuff too is at the end of the day, if you're buying a memorabilia card, yes, you're buying the card, but you're really buying the piece of memorabilia. And not that the card around the memorabilia doesn't matter at all, because it certainly does. You want it to look nice, you want it to have, good quality about it and things like that. But, at the end of the day, you're really spending the money on the memorabilia piece. If you're spending $50 on a Wayne Gretzky memorabilia card, it's not really about the card. It's about you're buying a Wayne Gretzky memorabilia card. So if you can get a Gretzky jersey card from Leaf or from President's Choice or from In the Game or whatever it might be for $50 and a similar size jersey piece from Upper Deck maybe costs 100, yeah, there's a reason why the one is 100 and the one is 50. But if you're just looking purely at the fact of I want a Gretzky memorabilia card, you have the opportunity to get them for a lot cheaper through the unlicensed manufacturers just because, it's not licensed, it doesn't picture him, doesn't have the logo, whatever it might be. So, there's ways of acquiring really nice pieces for your collection without breaking the bank like you might have to do if you were doing it through a licensed company. So that's just an interesting thing to keep in mind too. I think that really wraps up everything pretty much about the main topic, being the outlook and mentality toward the hobby. Is there anything else that you want to add, Aaron, or are we good to wrap things up?
I'm good. Like, we can wrap it up. This was an awesome episode. Hopefully you guys learned something. And yeah, it was nice to talk things through.
Cool. Yeah, definitely a little bit longer of an episode, but hopefully it was enjoyable to listen to and insightful. And whether you're a new collector, maybe you learned some things, got some new outlooks on things. If you're an experienced collector, maybe, we reminded you of some things, or encouraged you or, whatever it might be. So hopefully you guys found this worthwhile. Just felt that this was a really important topic to talk about just because there have been a lot of people that have been discouraged over the last couple of years or have been confused about the direction they should take or thought they knew something about the hobby but came to realize maybe that isn't the case. So I just thought that kind of unpacking some of these topics might be helpful for you guys, so hopefully it was. One last thing before we wrap up for the episode. I know on one of the more recent episodes, the Topps Pristine box break episode, that I had mentioned the possibility of there being a group break for a box of the product. And I did float that out on social media, I think last month, and definitely got some, encouraging response on that. Just, seeing if people would be interested kind of based on a rough estimate of the price and, things like that. And like I said, the response was decent. Didn't immediately get enough to just do it. So I do want to, quote unquote, kind of officially announce that I want to try to do it. So again, that being 2304 Topps Pristine. If you missed it, go back. I think it was episode 54. We did a live box break of the product as well as a very thorough breakdown of what all is in the product. So go back. I would encourage you to watch that episode either on Facebook or YouTube so you can actually see it happen because it's a very unique and interesting product if you're not familiar with it. So go back and watch it. And then if that sounds like something that's interesting to you, like I said, I think I am going to try to do a group break for it. I'll probably try to pump this out a little bit more on social media coming up here, but it'll be a team random group break. I think that's just kind of the most fair way to do this product, just because there are obviously some huge hits for a couple of teams and then some teams that have very little in the product. And then also just based on the configuration, how many cards you're getting, I think it's just the most fair to do a team random so that you're hopefully spreading out that value to as many people as possible. So it'll be a team random. Obviously, back then there were only 30 teams. So it's 30 spots, 25 US per spot. And that includes shipping, that includes supplies, all of that. $25 US all in per spot. And obviously, you can get multiple spots. That would be wonderful. I know just based on the social media posts from earlier where I was kind of gauging interest. It seems like there's probably about 10 spots already kind of spoken for. So we're on our way, have a little bit of work to do to get it closed, but I think that for $25, it is absolutely worth it. Again, if you guys did not see that episode, please go back and watch it. I think it's arguably the nicest hockey card product literally ever made, just from how amazing every single card looks in the product, from the base to the parallels to the memorabilia cards, autographs, everything in the product is just stunning. So I'm glad that I have the boxes and that I can, hopefully give you guys the opportunity to get in on it and enjoy the product too. Obviously, just paying up for a full box yourself is, not something that a lot of people can do. So I think doing it, as a group break is something fun for the podcast, and hopefully get a lot of people involved with it and that they can enjoy those cards. And one unique thing to note about this is the base cards will be included. So typically with group breaks, base cards are not, it's only the hits. But again, since this is a very small box break, we'll just do one box for now. And there's not a ton of cards in each box. The base cards will be included. And Aaron, you can speak for yourself on this. You can tell everybody that those base cards just on their own are extremely nice cards. So
They're amazing.
Yeah. So even just if you were to just get a base card, I think obviously, yeah, that's not a $25 card, but still, I think you would appreciate the card and, really feel like, yeah, like this was an enjoyable experience. So, and of course, you could do extremely well and get, a Bergeron rookie card or a Fleury rookie card or a really nice memorabilia card or, whatever it might be, one of those amazing gold refractors out of 33, whatever it might be. You could do really well in this for a very, relatively cheap cost, especially considering that most group breaks now, even for the very cheapest of breaks, you're spending 40, 50, 60 bucks. So for 25 bucks, yes, it's a very small break. You might not get anything. Most teams will. I want to say in that box break, I think around there are probably at least 20 teams that got a card. So odds are good that you'll get something, even if it is just a base. If you don't, I'll probably try to do something to help you out there just so you don't feel totally burned. But yeah, just wanted to put it out there. I think we will try to officially do a group break for a box of 0304 Topps Pristine, 25 US per spot for a team random break. If you are interested in that, please get a hold of us on any of our social media platforms, whether that be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You can email us. You can reach out to us, just on our personal accounts, whatever it might be. Just say, hey, I'm interested. Maybe you want to learn more about it. Maybe you say, yeah, like I'm in, give me a spot. I think we will probably wait on payment until it's full, just because I don't really know how long it may or may not take to fill it. So I don't want people just having paid and then it just sits potentially for a while. So all I ask is that if you commit to a spot, stick to it. I think that's just, the most fair for everybody. So yeah, hope that you guys see the value in this. It's a very unique product, a very scarce product. You will not see this stuff again. It's just not out there. So great opportunity to get in on something really unique and fun. And I don't even know. I mean, was group breaking a thing back then? I don't even think group breaking existed back then. So this very well could be the very first group break of Topps Pristine literally ever. So, hey, it's part of history potentially. So get involved with it, have fun with it. 25 bucks, why not? I think you guys will be happy with it. And yeah, so just reach out to us if you're interested in that. Aaron, I know you're probably going to buy all the remaining spots, right? Just because you love the product so much and have money to burn. So,
100%. I just need all those base cards.
Yeah. So, no, but yeah, in all seriousness, guys, it's a great product. And if you haven't watched that episode with that box break, please do, because it was a ton of fun. So just want to get as many people involved with that as humanly possible so that you guys can enjoy the heck out of that product as well. So I think I don't want to harp on that too much. I know I just rambled about that for however many minutes, but it's exciting. It's an amazing product. So just want to officially kind of put that out there, establish that the plan is to do that. So hit us up with however many spots you want, and we will go from there. So I think that will officially do it for episode 56. Again, apologize for it being a little bit long of an episode, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it nonetheless. As always, please be sure to follow us on social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at CICC, and on Twitter at CICC. Please also be sure to subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice to make sure you never miss a future episode. Until next time on Sunrise Cardcast, keep collecting those hockey cards.